Hey guys, now that all the divine beasts are out, we got a tier list. This is both a tier list for how good they are and the order you should probably want to acquire them in, so let's check them out. First off, we have Mighty Tiger heading into A tier. At level 0, which is what you get for activating them, he'll applies a Tiger Split, which is a debuff to a random enemy officer at the beginning of the battle, which lasts until the battle ends. This reduces crit res and healing received by 15% while also increasing final damage taken by 20%. Just at unlock, it's only against a single random enemy, so it's not that great yet, but pushing this all the way to Unparalleled 5 makes this apply to all enemy officers and increases the crit res and healing received debuff to 40%. It also applies a White Tiger mark to all enemies, which has a 10% chance to increase the next direct damage taken by 100%. After each action taken or taken direct damage is when the 10% proc triggers. If the effect doesn't trigger, this increases by 10% until it does. As with a lot of these beasts on this tier list, you might not want to level them up to Unparalleled before you move on to the next because you do get diminishing returns. But we're going to assume at this point in the game there's a lot of high spenders left, so we're just going to talk about unlock levels and then the Unparalleled levels for all of them. At Martial Soul 5, he'll apply Tiger Roar to all enemies, which has a 30% chance to damage the enemy based on max HP, as well as reducing attack and defense by a little bit. But when you pair this guy with other things that prevent healing, like the Beyond Beast and one of the few IMT units that can prevent healing, you can shut down enemy teams' healing pretty effectively with this guy. Now we have Incandescent Bird going into B tier. At unlock at the beginning of the battle, this guy applies Undispellable Divine Plume to one random ally officer that lasts until the battle ends. This increases crit and heal received by 15% and final damage reduction by 20%. Once you get him to Unparalleled 5, the crit res and healing received goes up to 60%, so he's effectively a counter for Tiger, although Tiger does release quite a bit earlier than him. He also applies an Undispellable Vermilion Bird Mark to all allies, which gives them a 10% chance to reduce the next direct damage taken by 100% after each action or taking direct damage. Increases by 10% if the effect doesn't trigger. At Martial Soul 5, it triggers on character deployment for the entire team and applies Nirvana, which reduces final damage taken by 12% and crit res by 8% for the next 4 hits taken. For every 1 rage, it'll apply those. It also increases final damage by 25% and crit rate by 15% on the next skill cast for every 1 rage. It can stack up to 3 times, but the stacks only count to trigger the skill, not for the effects of it to stack. This one is decent as not only gives you a good final damage and crit buffs, but some final damage reduction and crit res, plus multiple triggers per the battle, even though they're pretty low. The bird's basically a counter to the tiger's healing reduction, so if you notice yourself getting your healing shut down in a lot of PvP fights, you could probably focus on this guy a little bit more, which would personally bring him up higher in the tier list for you. Next, we have Guardian Tortoise, or Guarding Tortoise, going into S tier. At level 0 unlock, this guy increases the team's crit res and defense by 10% for 1 turn, and dispels 2 debuff stacks from 2 random officers, all at the end of the turn. At Unparalleled 5, the crit res and defense applies to all officers. Every 1 debuff dispelled grants the officers Bulwark, which gives them a 8% of max HP shield. When there are less than 4 debuffs dispelled, every 1 debuff less increases the officer's defense by 5% for 1 turn. At Martial Soul 5, he grants an Irresistible Guard to 4 targets with the lowest HP and heals them to at least 50% HP while also giving them a 20% shield. When an officer with Guard dies, if they have triggered Revival, it grants them a 60% Bulwark shield after Revival. If they haven't triggered Revival, it just heals them straight up to 60% HP. It's kind of just another Sundering Behemoth in a way, and it's going to increase your team's survivability quite a bit, especially when paired with Nua and Sundering Behemoth. Your team's going to be pretty tanky with this guy. Second last, we've got Auspicious qilin heading to SS tier. At level 0, at the start of odd numbered turns, he grants an Undispellable Divine qilin to 1 random ally, which increases attack and defense by 10% and deals 25% more damage to shielded officers for 1 turn. At Unparalleled 5, this buff is applied to 5 officers, and attack and defense are increased by 25%, as well as damage to shielded officers increases by 50%. It also deals 50% more damage on the next hit after receiving a shield. This guy's going to help a lot with the massive shields we're seeing in fights nowadays, because you can see people just like tanking attacks and never damaging their HP with the amount of shields they get, and this guy's going to increase the damage to the shields quite a bit. At just Martial Soul 4, triggers at the start of each turn and grants an Undispellable qilin Rage to the entire team. This reduces final damage taken by 100% up to 5 times per turn, as well as increasing damage boost and damage reduction by 5% up to 150%. That happens every time a skill is cast by enemies. On Martial Soul 5, you'll also get an immunity to skill damage after taking skill damage, and each skill cast by officers increases final damage of the next skill by 100%. This guy's really good for damage and survivability, as well as the utility to combat the shields, so don't pass up on this guy, but make sure you work on him after you work on this next beast because he's the best. Triple S tier, Imperion Dragon. At unlock, this guy gives you 3 stacks of Undispellable Divine Dragon Shield to 2 random allies for 1 turn at the start of the battle. Divine Dragon Shield makes you immune to all control and debuff effects, including the irresistible ones. That's crazy. Although it does exclude the rage reduction, it's got to exclude something, because that's pretty strong already. At Unparalleled 5, this turns into 6 stacks for all allies. Each stack doesn't increase your attack and defense by 15% for each stack, it's just 15% no matter what, but it still includes all the irresistibles and excludes the rage reduction for each stack. It means that you'll have CC immunity for each stack. While you have any amount of stacks, you'll have that attack and defense buff, and it'll also restore 8% of max HP every time immunity is triggered. His Martial Soul is also pretty good. When it reaches level 4, you'll apply an irresistible and undispellable dragon curse to the entire enemy team at the start of even numbered turns. This actually forbids enemies from receiving any healing or rage regen. It also prevents the enemies from receiving dispellable invincible effects as well as dispellable shield effects, and has a 50% chance to extend Dragon Curse by 1 turn after it ends, so this can constantly be up. When you reach Martial Soul 5, instead of forbidding healing and shield, they'll receive 30% of healing and shield as damage instead, which is kind of hilarious. If they try to get an invincible effect, they'll instead take 20% increased final damage from the next attack, and if they try to get some rage regeneration, they'll lose 50% of the rage that they were going to regenerate. And as you can see, this guy's just a step above the rest of the Divine Beasts. It not only gives you some great crowd control immunity, but also shuts down the enemy team's buffs and regens pretty damn well. Now, it doesn't look like we have any packs for them. I thought we did, but I must have been confused with something else. But we have the Beast Recruitment here, which does give you half of a beast here. It's only 25 shards, so you need 2 of these packs, but it does give you 40 tokens. And this is probably the best place to spend right here. You get 50 tokens on a whole beast for even less than that. So if you are going to be spending any money on these divine beasts, make sure to check out my affiliate code from Aptoide. I'll have a video linked in the description below showing you how to use it, and you'll get 10 to 30% on all your purchases back in AppCoin credits that you can then use to spend in-game. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the divine beast tier list. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe and let me know what you think of the tier list. I'll catch you next time. See ya.